Hello, I'm Mark Tucker,
Hey, I'm Alan Furstenberg,
and welcome to Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Howdy, Mark.
Hello, Ellen.
Hello.
Another another fine day to talk about AI.
Yes,
From
another fine day about AI, but what's the title of this podcast, Mark?
Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. We don't talk about voice nearly enough, though, do we?
No, we don't. So I guess you've got some topic that we're going to talk about that has to do with voice.
Yeah, I think so. So,
Good.
it feels like a few months back at this point, Google released an experimental TTS model, what they called a preview TTS, for Gemini 2.5. And there were a lot of elements about it that really, really impressed me in a lot of ways. I wrote a blog post about it and playing with it with LangChainJS. And I feel like, let's take a look at it and play with it a little bit and kind of see where some of it's going because I think some of it's pretty remarkable.
Great. Yeah. Let's do it, and we'll kind of compare what we used to do in the old days.
Yeah, it's very different than the old days. I think one of the things that kind of inspired a lot of this, though, is we've talked about Notebook LM, and it had that great podcast feature with two hosts talking to each other. And I feel like this TTS is kind of inspired by that, or was kind of you know at the heart of what they were able to pull off back then. So let's take a look. So what we can see is I'm in Google's AI Studio. I'm in the Generate Media tab. So instead of going to the regular chat conversation, I'm in a very specific Generate Speech section.
Okay.
I've selected the Pro Preview TTS. We're going to do a single speaker audio, um, and we're going to use a voice they call Zephyr, which they identify as bright with a higher pitch. And you can
Okay.
do this either with Pro or Flash. You know what? Let's switch to Flash because that's going to go a little bit faster. So we've given it hi there. We've told it to act cheery, and let's run this and see what it does.
Hi there.
So that was pretty fast. A fairly cheery,
Yeah.
kind of high pitched hi there.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward, right?
Right.
Now, and as always, one of the neat things about this is just part of the Gemini API. It's only available with the AI Studio API right now, but it's just the API that we're used to. And if we look at, what code for this looks like, it's pretty straightforward code. Lots of it is stuff that we should be familiar with. We're defining a model name. The big new deal here is that we've got this entity called response modalities, which indicates that we want it to generate audio, not just text. Here I have the name of the value that the voice that I wanted to use, which is an entirely rememberable name in this case. Um, we set up the model. We have a prompt: say cheerfully, have a wonderful day. We invoke it to get our result, and then we need to convert that into a big endian int16 configuration with a fixed sample rate, and then create an audio buffer and play it. So,
Okay.
I mean, the part about this that seems most remarkable to me is what is that? 9 lines of code are dedicated to actually extracting and playing the audio, and 1 line, 2 lines to do it.
Pretty
So if
pretty
we,
slick.
yeah, so it's simple, it's straightforward. It gives us a straightforward TTS result. I think the big catch is we don't have that fine grained control that we did in the SSML days.
Yes. So because sometimes depending on what word that it would pronounce the word differently, because there's different pronunciations for the same spelling of word depending on context. You'd hope that that would pick that up automatically, but you couldn't like set emphasis on specific words or. um, or parts of a
Right.
sentence, right?
But here's the thing that I think is kind of interesting is that, well, let's try this first.
Hi there. Are you okay?
Ah,
So I think what's interesting about it is that you can give it information in the text itself that will shape how it answers. Doesn't always work exactly the same, but there we tried saying it softly. Let's try. So let's try
Hi
this.
there. Are you okay?
I don't know how well it's following it, but at least in theory,
yeah.
you can give it these kinds of conversation, kind of cues about how to speak.
Okay.
So that's one person talking, which we're used to. Okay.
Yeah.
If we wanted to change the speaker here, we can change the speaker, run it again.
Hi there. Are you okay?
You know,
Yeah.
and yeah, sure, we could send this, multiple calls to do this. The real neat part, though, is if we go into multi-speaker audio. And with multi-speaker, we're essentially writing a script instead. We're now defining the voice settings for two different speakers, and we can give them names. So let's change some of this. Let's now say we've got a couple of names. We'll call one of them Brian. And we're going to call the other one Sarah. And it's giving us a warning because our script no longer contains these speakers by name. And here, let's give it a prompt like TTS, the following conversation between Brian and Sarah. Pay attention to instructions about how each person speaks and other sounds they may make. So we're explicitly saying we're going to introduce some other stuff here.
Okay.
And let's have Brian say, how's it going today, Sarah? So in there, I've actually typed in Brian colon, how's it going today, Sarah? Now
Okay.
let's add some more dialogue where Sarah replies and says, uh, not too bad. How about you? And let's have Brian reply saying, maybe they're going to, let's say, they will sigh and sound tired. It has been a rough day. Boy, does that sound familiar, right?
Yeah.
And you know what? Let's have, instead of Sarah replying, let's see if we can change this. So it's not going to be Sarah replying. I guess it will be Sarah replying. So maybe Sarah will reply saying something like, but the week should improve. And if we look at what this looks like, so it's got, some text to the prompt, and it's got this, scripted back and forth. And I wonder if we can
Okay.
edit this actually. You know what? So let's change this from Sarah to Brian. So we've we've got this conversation between Brian and Sarah with some instructions about how it should sound. So let's see, or let's hear what that sounds like.
How's it going today, Sarah?
Not too bad. How about you?
It has been a rough day, but the week should improve.
Now, the only interesting part about that is I think it reversed the voices.
Yeah.
Other than that, you heard now, and the other thing is, I'm probably going to edit out the wait, but it ran for. I don't think we saw how long it ran for. It ran for several seconds to produce a 9-second audio clip, though. And other than that, it followed the instructions fairly well. We heard a sigh and sounding tired, and then it perks up. Um, and as the script goes, that went fairly well, right?
Yeah.
So if we look at what that code looks like, we see a couple of slight differences. So for the speech configuration, we've now had to identify who the speaker is and which voice they're using by name. And I use different ones here again. Uh, Running the model's the same as it's always been. Our prompt is a little longer, but that's the exact prompt that I entered in AI Studio.
Right.
Invoking it's the same, and getting the results back and playing it back is exactly the same.
Yeah.
So the only real difference is that we've moved from just defining one voice to two voices, to two speakers, and we've given it a script.
Yeah.
And
Seems pretty simple.
it's really simple, it's really straightforward. We're giving it some audio cues that it's following fairly well.
Yeah. Kind of like we're writing a little screen, screenplay or whatever, and we're defining who's saying what and kind of how they're doing it.
Exactly. Now, one catch about this, though, is that this model, it's a decent model, but it's really particularly tuned for voice generation. It's not well tuned for other conversational stuff. So, if I asked a question, eh, I guess we could see how well it does, but I'm not optimistic. If we go back to the single speaker audio, so we give it a question, tell it to answer the question that's prompted. Let's run that and see what it does. We get an error. It's not really meant like other models are. It's really, really tuned for text to speech.
Yeah. So you'd have some LLM that would give what kind of the answer. You'll get some sort of an output back, and then you would feed that into this model that would generate the audio to then playback.
Exactly. If we look at some code to do that, again, we're using LangChainJS. This does a few things a little bit differently. So we have a function that is going to take a topic of research and then the name of the first and second host. It then gives it a prompt for provide a short one paragraph summary on the following topic, and it takes a topic in. Adds that to our conversational history, and then what we're going to do is now turn this paragraph into a conversation between two people with those names written as a script. Here's an example script, and it kind of leads for that, pushes that into the convert, and invokes that as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Okay.
So now it's had this little conversation, or we have a function that does this little conversation and gets back a script. Pretty straightforward, as always. Now we've got this other conversation that's going to read that script. And
So we got
again,
two functions. Is that what we're saying? We got
yep,
one function that answers the question and formats it into a conversation, and then another one that audiofies the script itself. Okay.
exactly. And this kind of mimics that, it's a kind of a little version of Notebook LM. So you give it a topic, it gives you something about that topic, and they're going to have a little bit of a back and forth about it.
Gotcha.
And that's, again, TTS the following conversation between Brian and Sarah. Pay attention to instructions about how each person speaks and other sounds they make in our script, which is exactly what we just did.
Yep.
So all of that code is the same. And then we invoke it by saying, make the script, show me the script, read the script out loud. And here we have it testing it on sharks. So this is that clever way to say, use the right model for the right thing. Use one
Yep.
model to collect your information, build the script, do that tech, do what a large language model is really good at, and that's language and text. And then use this other model to turn that into the script.
Very nice. So yeah, that's pretty straightforward. It's two functions. Divide the things up by what purpose they serve. One model per function. doing special purpose, whatever it's best at.
Exactly. I feel like we often try to get into this mentality of we have to stick everything into a single prompt and do it all at once.
Yeah.
And what I think agents are beginning to show us, and you could easily see how that turns into an agent, where in every round of the conversation you delegate it to one tool that gets a response and then another tool that turns it into audio. And you know what? I probably should rewrite that post to talk about how here we have an agent with two sub agents to it,
Yep.
and that's what it is.
Well, very good.
So just a little taste on what I think is some really cool features that are coming. Like I said, that's in preview, but it's also notable that it's in Gemini 2.5 preview. So it's using the latest model to do this.
All right. Is this incorporated? I guess it is. It is incorporated. Nothing special had to be added to LangChainJS to in order to run this model. Is
LangChainJS
that
did
correct?
require a couple of extra changes. In particular, sending that voice configuration,
Oh, the new audio configuration option, or
the speech configuration is part of the configuration that we pass along to the model.
oh, okay.
So LangChainJS needed to know that that configuration exists so it could pass it along. It needed to know the response modality parameter for the configuration again, so that it could pass it along. Um, but other than that, the other sort of thing that it needed to know was that the content that came back can be audio content, and that it might need to not treat this as text. But that wasn't too difficult. That was code that was already being put in because Google is sending back images and other stuff now too. So Gemini is a true multimodal system that can send and receive text and audio. So that part was a change that needed to go in anyway. I think it was already in.
All right. So, but
So
those changes are already available, already in, so you could pull the latest version of LangChain and this look at and follow along with this code and do the same thing that you've got, right?
yep, this is available in LangChainJS today.
Great. And I'm assuming you had something to do with that integration.
I had everything to do with that integration.
Well, good. I wanted
So
to make
yes,
sure that you got your proper credit for continuing to contribute to open source, so that
that
that we can have access to this.
I say that, but that's not entirely true. I mean, there are other people um, that certainly reviewed my code when it went in. They gave
Yeah.
valuable feedback. We had lots of discussions about the best way to make sure that these multimodal responses came back in a way that made sense. And there was a lot of discussion around that. And in fact, enough discussion that future versions of LangChainJS are going to be, restructuring things so it is more and better supported across models.
Okay, good.
Um, and so I'm very appreciative of the LangChainJS team, very appreciative of Google who gave me some credits to help me explore this. But I have a question for you. You have a library called Speech Markdown,
Yeah.
and based on this, I'm kind of wondering, what do you think? Do you think you would make changes to Speech Markdown? Do you think Speech Markdown has a place in this sort of thing?
Kind of don't think so. I think the time for speech markdown was,
Hmm.
in the past, and with this new model, yeah, I don't necessarily, because it was using a simpler format, or kind of more of a cross-platform format, um, to get responses out, be able to put emphasis where you wanted to, or pronounce things a certain way. And I think the technology has advanced past that. Yeah, it would be interesting to say, if there's any type of standardization in the future with those annotations that you put in square brackets in the
Yeah.
text and run that through different models to see, because I think that was part of the problem too, is that Speech Markdown was trying to solve that something was supported in one but wasn't in the other, but could you kind of have a smart, you know, format? So there might be some kind of library that would swap out those annotations, maybe, because maybe it's expecting. But I don't know. I don't think so. I would think that you wouldn't be stuck on a specific word to say, faster. You could probably say more quickly, and it would just do, a similar thing. It's using this semantic understanding that large language models have about the English language or any language, right? So yeah, I don't think so. I think it's moved on from what I was doing with speech markdown, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't feel like I need to bring up my old libraries that I wrote and I spent so much time on. Um, I'm not sure where their place is now. I don't know that they have one. I
Yeah,
do feel like this is cool and this is great, but I feel like there's still a lot that we need to understand about writing these scripts and using them in a way that's going to make sense. I mean, I trimmed out it doing the speech generation and how long that took. It's not really an acceptable amount of time, to be perfectly honest. It's
yeah.
got to be better and faster. So that's one of the issues I have with it still.
Yeah, and one of the things that you used to be able to do when you were sending something to a text to speech API and getting back audio, that you could cache that, and you could then see if you needed to
Mm.
reuse that. Or but it seems like everything's got to run through the model. There's not necessarily a caching mechanism, unless there was some way you could tie in RAG or something with as it generates it, it puts it someplace where then it can reuse it again. But um,
Well, I mean,
not
I
sure
think if you're
what efficiencies there would be for that.
yeah, I think if you end up saying the exact same thing, you
Yeah,
could, but that introduces a big layer of complexity, I think.
yeah, and that's kind of the thing with we were trying to simulate variation in a conversation, so the our bot or voice assistant wasn't saying exactly the same thing over and over again. But
Right.
you also had to, kind of have a finite number of those variations. Whereas now, you know, large language models can generate whatever. You can give it some guidelines that you want it to be short, but it's going to do some natural variation anyway. It's not going to necessarily always give you the same response back for the same input.
Right. And again, in this case, since it is text to speech, that's something we're controlling on the text generation side.
Yep.
And then here, it depends on how you plug it in and use it.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me show that. This has been when I first saw it and I first played with it, I thought it was really cool. And I was thinking back to our classic days of voice generation, which I hope will return soon. I'd really kind of like to see what people are doing with this.
Yeah. It's good to see voice coming back into it.
Yes.
Which is something that was really dear to my heart, and really helpful for a certain audience of that were interacting, that couldn't necessarily interact with the chatbot, but could interact with the voice assistant. It you know I like the fact that that's seeming like it's becoming possible again. We
Yes.
do have to handle the latency
The
issue
latency is a
with the
yeah.
responses.
Yes, the latency is a big issue. And the fast model works a little bit better, although it's a little bit more out of control. As I said to someone today, voice still feels like the natural and the right interactive UI for AI. Typing as a chatbot, it still feels wrong, whereas voice feels right.
Yeah, and I think
So
things are improving. The understanding the input is improving, and the kind of the generation of responses, and now the text to speech as well. So I think we're moving in that direction, and I think it'll just become easier and easier to have that be the default.
I agree. I hope so.
Well, thank you.
So,
I found this very interesting. It was kind of fun to talk about voice again,
isn't it?
and yeah, and relate that back to something that we've been doing for quite a while. So good topic today. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you for listening. And I'd love to see what folks think. As always, can find us on LinkedIn or leave a comment below. Uh, Hope you like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you another time on Two Voice Devs.
Good voice devs. Take care, Alan.
Take care, Mark.